Hi, welcome to Hands on SAP Dev. This episode is a little bit special because I've got a guest on, Kevin Mussig, a friend and colleague of mine, another developer advocate. And in this episode, we're going to look at the converter component. It's one of the components in the developer Keynote repository. And Kevin's going to take us through what he wrote there from a Go language-based service, how it works, we're going to deploy it, and then we're going to connect it up to the brain component and get the brain component to consume that conversion service to bring values back, running at brain level 3. So thank you so much, Kevin, for joining. Please, everyone say hi to Kevin when we move to the next scene. And yeah, so let's go.
Okay, so we're about to start looking at the converter, but let's have a quick look, me and Kevin, as to where we left off last time, which was basically looking at the brain component, because it's the brain component that's going to be utilizing the converter, the conversion service. So what we did last week and the week before is look at running the brain component locally, and we ran it, if you remember, at two different levels: brain level 1 and brain level 2. So brain level 1, if you remember, is basically all it's going to do is emit or it log the message that it receives when we emit a message from the emitter. Brain level 2, which we covered last week, sort of independently, is going to the sandbox component, the proxy that's proxying the API sales order service API, and grabbing the details of the sales order that's been that's in the message. Sales order 1, for example, goes and gets the header, the sold to party, and most importantly for this episode, the net amount of that sales order. So let's just quickly, before we dive in to the converter, let's just go to our Hands on SAP Dev dev space in our app studio, business application studio, and let's just run that. So we've got here, we're inside of the brain, in the serve, we've got the service here, and this is what we did. We've got the brain level 1 that just logs things out. And you've seen this before as well, haven't you, Kevin?
Yep.
Perfect. And the brain level 2 goes and gets sales order details from the S/4HANA system through the API. So let's just run that. If I go into here, cap brain, and start it up with brain level 2, CDS run. And Kevin, you haven't seen this brain level control thing, but it's just basically making it easier for folks to get up and running with all the different components at once. You know, it's like a bit like, you know, spinning on lots of different plates. Where do you start? So let's run that. And we'll also open up another terminal here. You can see CDS is listening on 4004 as normal. Let's go into the S/4HANA event and emit a sales order, created message with sales order 1. And we should see at brain level 2 down here, we should see the logging out of that. And also for brain level 2, it says, right, okay, I've got the sales order number, it's 1. Let me go and get the details from the API, and we see the total net amount is 52.65. So what we want to do is bring the converter to life so that we can do brain level 3, which goes and asks for the credit version of this total net amount. So this is where the wonderful Mr. Kevin Mussig comes in. So where do we start, Kevin? Where do we start?
The best place to start is in the GitHub repository of the developer Keynote in the SAP samples.
Cool.
And there you will basically find all the instructions and explanation you would need to deploy and run the converter service.
Okay.
So you find the converter.
Yep, the converter's just down here. In fact, we've got a link to all the major components: sandbox, emitter, converter, brain, front end, and charity. So we're talking about the converter. And
right.
you've got a diagram here that sort of contextualizes this, right? We've been looking at diagrams on previous episodes, so this should hopefully help us. So what is the converter for, and what is it doing?
Yeah. So the converter is basically just a Go language application or little service running on Kyma, packaged in a Docker image. And the only thing it does, it takes in the sales amount, calculates the credits, and returns the credits back as a JSON to your brain component. And then
so it's a nice, simple, flat, let's call it, RESTful HTTP service. It's nothing special. It's not OData. It's not anything wild and wacky. It's a beautiful, simple, here's a value, give me the result back.
Right. No authentication, no nothing. It's just basically, here is the amount, give me the calculation back.
Perfect. And the general idea of no authentication was because this is a service that runs in the entire organization and is used by lots of different systems, and it's a publicly available sort of calculation. So why not make the service public as well, right?
Right.
So you've got lots of really cool instructions here. So shall we go through them?
Right. So it starts out with the main.go file. So if you want to drill into the main.go file, so we can just go over the code real quick.
I think this is a first. Is this the first time we've ever had any Go language on hands-on SAP Dev?
I think so. Yeah.
Nice.
So so we got the Go service right there. If you go up a little bit, you see the calculation result struct. This is basically a representation of the data structure for your API or for the API response you will receive when you call the service. The calculation error right now is just in there for being in there. So if we want to have error handling at some point, we could use that. But more interesting is the calculate donation credit. This takes a float 64. And it's a basic switch, which goes over the amount and just calculates the credits based on the amount you were putting in there. And the distinction here is just something we decided the way it's supposed to be.
That's right.
So nothing crazy there.
Yeah, I remember the company scenario that we had was that they wanted to award a certain number of credits, based upon not a linear scale, but based upon the net amount of a sales order, right?
Correct. So the Go language doesn't have a rounding function in it, so I've just written a small little math.round, so we get a nice value back with the 2 digits after comma. And then down here we have the main method, which would be the calculate, and it gets you pass in the response writer and the request, and then out of the request in line 50, it looks for a URL parameter sales amount. This is what you would call and put in the amount. The service parses it out, does the calculation, puts together a JSON response down in line 57 to 59.
Yep.
And just sends that back out to whoever requested the amount.
Beautiful, nice and simple.
Then down below, we have a welcome function, which just basically gives back welcome to the SAP Tech Developer Keynote. I put that in just for us if we deploy it to Kyma later on, so we have like a direct feedback if it's working or not. And then a little abstraction, the calculation handler, which is just called in calculate. And then down in the main function, we just call setup routes. Setup routes just basically says the route with a slash would show the welcome, and slash conversion would actually call the calculation handler. And then we let the whole thing listen and serve on 8080. And that's the whole Go service. So 85 lines of code.
Beautifully simple. I've never written a line of Go in my life, but I can understand all of this thanks to your wonderful explanation as well. But it's it's the same sort of pattern. You get an output, a web request output, web request import. You do stuff. Yeah, it's really cool. And you set up the routes. You associate paths with functions. Correct. Nice. So how do we get this available to the brain?
So basically, what we want to do is we want to deploy that Go service as a Docker image to the Kyma runtime. And what we see here is the deployment YAML file, and that basically just describes how the deployment on Kyma should look like.
Gotcha.
So we're calling the whole thing calc service, and it runs on the port 8080 with the name calc service, and we define the path for the API rule and the method, which is get. And then the exit strategies here, as we said, we don't have authentication. We just say noob. So that's basically just saying no authentication, right? And that's the deployment YAML. So first thing we want to do is we want to build the Go application into a Docker image. And I've created shell script files for that. You could just call. But I would say, DJ, we just go in and try that out ourselves.
Yeah, I think that's a nice idea. So what I've got, I know that folks who've watched previous episodes in this series know that we have been using the SAP Business Application Studio, which is awesome. We've got command line and everything, and for Docker purposes, we use some GitHub Actions. But I think it'd be really cool to do something a little bit different, the alternative, and do it from the command line. So I've got here, I'm in my cloned version of my repo. I'm in the converter directory, and these are the things that you were referring to that we're not going to use, but this is the Docker build script, right?
Correct. Yeah. So what you see here is the Docker build script, as you just said, and then you see the SAP samples in the Docker GitHub URL. So if you want to execute, if you want to execute a shell script yourself, just put your name in there, which is Q macro in your case.
Perfect. Okay. So
and then you could execute that.
So let's first of all, though, let's just do it manually, like you said. I think I really like this idea of doing everything and watching it happen. So we're going to build it locally. The dot is basically this directory, right? And just tag it with a basic calc service. So let's run that. Let's see what happens. Wow, that was pretty fast. Okay, so we've now, in fact, let's have a look, right? Docker image list.
And you should see the calc service right there.
Yeah, okay, calc service. Perfect. Okay, so now if we go to the next bit, we can actually run it. This is running it locally, right?
Correct. We can run this whole thing, this Docker image, in detached mode, so in the background, and then we could try out the calculation service on our local host.
Oh yeah, let's do that. Let's do that. Okay. So if I go here and just run that, copy paste, and that ID there, if I remember rightly, is basically the ID of the running process of the container, because you've said detached, right? So if we say docker ps -a, we should see that. Yeah, there we go. Oh, there's my old ABAP trial, but this is the thing here, right? C8EA, blah, 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 blah. So that means then, there we go. We got something listening on 8080. So are we going to do that here, right? Localhost, lolcat host, localhost 8080.
8080. And we see our welcome message right there.
Ah, nice. So that is the first route, isn't it, that you're associated with the simple slash with the welcome function.
Correct. And if you would do /conversion and then pass in the sales amount,
wasn't it?
You should get a credit back.
123. Oh, did I press enter there? Oh, sorry. Oop, that was my fault. It's a query parameter, so we need to obviously tell it's a query parameter. There we go, 24.6 credits.
And we get a nice JSON back.
So we've got the calculation running, the conversion service running in a Docker container from a Docker image that we're running locally. But really, that's not that helpful from a cloud perspective, right? We need to do something else. So let's go back here.
Correct. Our goal now is to make that Docker image available, so the Kyma runtime later on can fetch that image and run it in a pod.
Perfect.
And for that, there is the Docker publish shell script, and if we look into that, we can see how this is done. So you basically say Docker push and then the URL.
In fact, let me just, I know I'm just aware that our, let me just do this. I'm aware that our faces are probably obscuring the right-hand side of that. So let's just look at that in here as well. Docker publish, there we go. So in fact, this tells me two things. First of all, as you've already pointed out, we need to change the SAP samples, but we'll do that in a second. But also, if I run this right, well, let's do that now, actually. Q macro. So that basically, and this is because we're pushing this image to the GitHub Docker registry, right? The Docker registry that's
Correct.
available to us on GitHub. We can see it there with the URL. And of course, I can only push that to mine. I'm DJ, I'm Q macro, and anybody has to change it to their own ID, because nobody can push it to SAP samples apart from people like you and me. So if we run that now, in fact, we need to do something else first, don't we? Because we need to build the image with this particular tag. I think we used calc service before, didn't we?
We did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
we got to change that.
We did that. So we now, in fact, have we got a script here to do it as well? Docker build there. Same
Correct.
thing.
And there you just change the SAP samples.
Q macro. Okay, cool. So if we run Docker build for now we should be able to run this Docker push, right? Docker, what was it?
Docker
publish. Docker publish. Perfect. Let's go and let's just quit out of there actually. There. Okay, so Docker publish. Let's see what happens. Ooh, there we go.
And when this is successful and it's done, you should actually see that package in your repository appearing.
Nice. Well, let's get ready. Oh, layer already exists. Okay, that's cool. For those wondering, yes, I mean we have sort of done this, did this, a short while ago. So some layers are already there. So let's go into, in fact, where it was going to be, and we've described this in previous episodes as well for other Docker images. Where it's going to be is not in the SAP samples org-based repo. We've got some there already, but these belong to SAP samples. If we look at mine, for example, and obviously all the viewers will look at theirs. There we go. Oh, yeah. So we had the S4 mock from a previous episode, so now we've got the calculation service as well, right? Beautiful. And
Perfect.
If we look at Q macro, oh my God, that's a big head. Packages. There it is. Calculation service published 1 minute ago. So
cool.
That's exactly
Perfect.
as a result of doing that. Okay, cool.
Right.
So let's go back to where
we
were.
We got this beautiful Docker image build. We got it exposed in your GitHub package registry.
Yep.
And now we can start deploying the application to Kyma. But first, before we actually deploy it to Kyma, because the Docker image is in your repository, we got to create a Docker registry secret first.
Ah, yes.
And that's the command you see right there.
This is this thing here. So looking at this thing here, in fact, let's just copy this whole thing. And let's do it here. So if I paste this in, and
right,
let's put some spaces so we can see what's going on. Paste this in. So we've got
replace the Docker username.
Yeah, create secret. So what we're doing here is we're creating a secret of type Docker registry. And
with the name regcred.
Yeah.
And then the Docker server, and then the Docker username and Docker password would be your GitHub user and GitHub password or token. And then your Docker email would be your GitHub associated email address.
Perfect.
And with that, you can create that secret. While you're putting that in case you're trying this out back home and you haven't set the kube config, you got to do this first, because if not, you cannot connect to your cluster.
Actually, before we run this, let's wipe out our kube config and see what happens, and then provide it so folks can see what to expect if they do hit that problem. What I'll do, we're recording this. What I'll do is I'll just create a new thing here and cat. What is it? GitHub repo and write packages. Let's copy it into my paste buffer. And now I'll just blur this out on post-production, as it were. So let's just paste that in. And off we go. Oh, I forgot to remove the YAML file. Never mind, the kubeconfig.
That's okay. People will probably know.
Yes, people probably know. Okay, so I'm going to clear the screen so I can get rid of that password there, that blurred out. And now, can we see that the secret exists? We can, can't we?
Right. You can go. You could use kubectl get secrets, or you could go to the Kyma console.
And we know that this is the one we've just created because that has an age of 19 seconds. It's 19 seconds old. Yeah, let's go to the console. I've got my trial account here. Let me go to the dashboard.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're looking in the default namespace, I assume, yes?
Right. And then down there under configuration, you see secrets.
Beautiful.
And then you should see that there it is.
There we go. A minute ago, reg cred. Beautiful.
Cool.
Okay, so.
And with that secret, Kyma can pull the Docker image from your repository and actually deploy it into Kubernetes.
And I remember when I asked in the keynote, can I do this on the command line? You said I could with kubectl, while at the same time, in a nice way, laughing at me, which is good. But I think you described more than one way to do this. So do you want to talk us through those?
Right. So we have 3 different ways for this repository to actually deploy that. The first would be just to run the Kubernetes deploy shell script I've written, which basically just does what the other 2 steps would be.
Gotcha.
Then we could use command line kubectl, and then we could just say replace, and then the deployment YAML into the default namespace, what you see down there.
Yep.
Or you could go over the Kyma console and actually do this there as well. So those are the 3 ways of deploying your application or the Go service into Kyma.
Well, let's do that. Let's use the console for a change. Now, obviously, this is nice and simple, and we've got the deployment YAML file. Oh, in fact, I guess we also need to make sure there's nothing in there we need to change. Yeah.
Right. In the deployment YAML, it references the Docker image. So we got to make sure it references the correct Docker image.
That's the one. So we've made the
if
change.
You don't want to, right? Yeah, right. You made the change and just saved it. Yeah,
perfect. So this says here, go to the Kyma console UI. So let's do that. We're in the console UI now. So where do we want to go? We want to go there
in your default namespace, and then on the top right, and I can't see it because of our faces.
Yeah,
but
let me just bring that across to here. So hopefully now we're using the sort of the fact that it's a windowed thing. It's over here, right? Yeah.
Correct. And then we can say deploy new workload, upload YAML, and then we select our YAML file.
So this is our deployment.yaml that we just changed. In fact, there it is in the Tech Developer Keynote. In the converter, in fact, that's the only one. That's the only selectable thing anyway. The deployment YAML,
and then just say deploy.
Deploy. That easy, eh? Oh, okay. So what just happened there? So it was 1/1 and 1/1. Now it's 1/2, 1/2. So tell us what that means.
So that means we've decided in our deployment YAML that we want one deployment running in one pod for that service. So because you have something running already in there, it says 1-2, but the Kyma runtime knows I need an additional one for the calculation service. So it shows it to you, and we see the green circles just went full. So the pod is started up and the deployment is running as well.
Yes.
So that means our service is up and running, and we can actually check that in the pods itself. If you would dive into the pods, we should see that pod running in there. Calc service up there.
Yes. The other pod was, of course, the proxy, the S4 mock service. Yeah. So there's the calc service.
Yeah, we see the correct. And then in the API rules, we can actually see that service being exposed over that URL, and that's what I've told you with the API rule in the deployment YAML. So the Kyma runtime knows what to do. So it created the API rule for us. And then if you just click on that URL, you should see the welcome message.
That looks familiar. So yeah, let's give it another tire kicking. So where is it? Conversion sales amount equals 1,000 credits 500.
And we get our credits. And with that, you can use the service in your brain component.
Well, let's do that now, actually. Yeah. So we've got here now what we need to consume this from the brain component is, of course, we need a connection to that. And for those who saw previous episodes, we were creating destinations, right, weren't we? So let's just go and bring that over here for a second. And in the brain service, let's go back. No, let's just use that. There. Where's the brain? There it is. There it is. There. Brain. What we're looking for here is destinations. So we're assuming that we're using the App Studio. Okay, we haven't used the App Studio in this case. We've got the message bus. We've got the S4 sales order destination set up because we needed that for brain level 2, but we now want to create the conversion service endpoint, a destination. So let's do that. So the name that the brain is expecting is charity fund converter. Let's go and create that. Let's go and do that across over here. Destinations, or come on, BTB cockpit, be kind to me. Destinations. So yeah, we've got here, let's just close that for a second. We've got this API Hub mock sales orders destination, which is this first one. But what we want is the second one, which is over here, charity fund converter. So let's create this destination. Because the CAP brain service consumes this conversion service through a destination, like everything else, right? So charity fund converter, paste that in. And we've got the URL, the base URL. Let's just be neat and tidy, get rid of that slash. Save, and that's it. The Kyma runtime endpoint for your converter component. Now, all we need to do, if I remember rightly, is, well, let's just be certain with ourselves as to why we need the destination called charity fund converter. It's because in package JSON, let's get rid of this again for a second. In package JSON, there's our conversion service. And look at that beautiful thing there, right? So the S4 sales order endpoint was an OData of type OData, kind OData. And of course, we needed the model so that CAP knew about it. But your conversion service in Go, it's a beautifully simple thing. It's just a plain HTTP API endpoint. So it's of REST, kind of representational state transfer. And we just point it to the destination. So theoretically, right, what we're about to do, let's get rid of the thing here, what we're about to do, and look how beautiful this is from the Go conversion service itself was beautiful, but look at this, right? That's it. That's all you need to do in CAP, in CDS, in JavaScript, Node.js, to connect to a REST endpoint and to make a call, right? So let's see. We have brain level 2, brain level 3, a big gulp. Let's see what happens. Let's open up another thing here again. Let's bring that there. Where is it? S4 HANA events, emit 1. Are we ready? Are we ready? Drum roll, please. Emit 1. Kevin, that was
there
awesome.
You go.
That was awesome, but not as awesome as the result. Look at that. Credit 7.9. Conversion
we got some credits back.
Available at work, connected to by the CAP service. All done.
Yep. And now we can plant some trees.
Now we can plant some trees. That was it. So, so if you've been watching this, have another look at Kevin's description here in the converter part where it is there. There it is. There's some extra stuff here at the bottom, Kevin. Just tell us, just before we end, just tell us what this extra stuff is down here.
So what I really like about Kubernetes and Kyma in general is the flexibility of replica sets in the service mesh, that you can basically say, like right now we're having like one pod running, one deployment, but if we want to scale that whole thing, we might want to have like multiple ones.
Right.
So we can change the replica set to 10 or 15, and then at a later point change it back if we don't need it anymore to 5 or 1 again. And the Kyma runtime will handle all of that for us. So we really don't have to do much. And in those optional steps here, you can just see how this is done, and you can try this out yourself just to see how it works. And if you scroll down a little bit, you can actually see we just change it in here and then just save that, and then the Kyma runtime will take it, and you see it's starting up
1/5
like
there,
new.
yeah.
Right, so it knows, oh, we have one pod running, the original pod, and then it's starting up 4 more. And then in the next screenshot, you actually can see these 5 calculation service pods running there for scalability, and that's great. And at any point, you can just take them away, and you don't have to worry about it because Kyma will do its magic.
Beautiful, beautiful. Kevin, I think we're done, don't you?
I think so too.
Well, thank you so much for joining Hands on SAP Dev.
Sure.
Yeah, this was the first Go code on Hands on SAP Dev. So Kevin, thank you so much, and thanks everybody for watching and taking part in the chat. And yeah, see you next time.
See you next time.